Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Extreme Studios on the Pinos Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have from the great Midwest RDV, the 30-something-year-old gentleman who's going to be helping me review a movie tonight. And as an 80s-based channel, we decided to go back to basics, and we're going to be doing Cobra from 1986, starring Sylvester Stallone. Basically, for those of you on the Extreme Movie Show that have been listeners for 5+ years here now that we've been in existence, you know, basically our unofficial 80s model, since I'm an 80s child and we're 80s-based here, and that's this. Bad movies are a disease, and we're the cure. RDV, this 1986, it's Stallone. We know we love it. We haven't really covered this one, so it's time we dive into it, because this is the time period in the 80s where we said movies changed. Commando was kind of that line in the sand. 1985 with Schwarzenegger. This one's just got a lot of style to it, even though it's just a generic 80s type of action flick. I don't mind it at all. I think it's a must-watch, especially if you're a fan. And every Stallone fan I know loves this movie. What's your take on it?
Well, it always never really dawned on me like that this was actually a canon classic. I thought this was another Warner Brothers movie that was in like Stallone's wheelhouse, whatever. But to learn that this was a canon movie, I was just like, holy crap! Because this is only a few years after we just did Death Wish 3, and it's like so. And I was kind of shocked that not only was Canon able to get Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson on there, like one of their wings in one of their movies, and I was like, "You guys, Sylvester Stallone movie?" And I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, this is 1986, so like this is almost during the height of Stallone's popularity, you know, or at least just getting there, because these guys already got Rambo under his belt. And he's got Rocky and stuff, and then here comes this Stallone is going to do this Cobra movie, you know, and he's going to help write it, and then it's going to be under Canon. He's going to help produce it. But I was just like, it's interesting to see that it actually was Canon film, because I didn't think this would be a Canon film. But then now that I go back and like watch it the second time, watching through it, it's like I can see why this would be a Canon movie, because it's kind of a smaller budget, but it walked away with a bigger profit. And like it's wow. The other thing I noticed here too is that I've always said Brigitte Nielsen is ugly in everything except for this movie.
Well, strong words there from a very powerful woman.
With the longer hair and stuff, you know, she actually looks decent here. She can make up stuff. She actually looks like a woman. Otherwise, you see her is like Red Sonja, and then the short hair, and then her hanging out with Flavor Flav, you know, in the 2000s.
You know, you can't go by that. Let me talk to you about that. So Stallone, let's talk about the look of Cobra. Cobra's a great looking movie. It's in LA. He's a cop. Basically, this is Beverly Hills Cop, but he said, screw it, I'm going to rewrite it for what I want. They didn't like it. Eddie Murphy made the movie, which, by the way, we reviewed the Netflix version, which is very good. And so he kind of adjusted to this, and Stallone's always about making characters. This might have been a quick, easy movie for him to film and do. We love it. Him and Brigitte Nielsen obviously ended up as an item there in the 80s. So there was something about punk in the late 70s, early 80s, just not just musically coming over from England, but just the way women had it. So short hair was really popular, from the Dorothy Hamill cut from the Olympics in the 70s to the 80s to like a punk look to it. So you definitely had like a Pet Benatar type of hairstyle look, and you definitely had this kind of look. And most women had the big fat teased hair that we see like in a lot of John Hughes films and 80s films in general. But she went totally aggressive grain, so it totally stands out. And it is a different look if you're not used to it, because you don't see a lot of women with it today. When you'd see somebody like her, or better yet, Grace Jones with her interesting look. I mean, both those women are fashionistas and models and performers, and all I'm going to say is I don't mind. You know, it's a different look from what we're used to seeing, but you don't have hardly any women today that have that big of a look to them.
She also acted more feminine in this movie. Remember in Beverly Hills, it was 2 or 3. She was still acting more butch. She was like the big tall bodyguard. And this, she's kind of the weak feminine, damsel distress. So it's a wholly different character for her. Like I said, like she came off more feminine in this movie than any other movie I've seen her in.
Yeah.
She always plays like the tough, Russian in Rocky Four, or she's like the tall blonde, short haired chick, that's in Beverly Hills Cop, that's gonna beat up Axel,
Well, the
like
thing about her too is and I think Stallone's not a tall dude, 5'8", 5'9". She's
no,
a legit 6 foot barefooted. So she is just
yes,
she was
yes,
totally different than the really thin micro models of the 70s. In the 80s, you started going to a bit more of a natural, healthy look, and Cindy Crawford comes to mind, and many others in Sports Illustrated. But for her to stand out, especially with her background being Danish, I think Danish people, generally speaking, are fairly tall, and they just have this big structure to them. They're basically the offspring of Vikings that plowed their way through. So either, you're from the Genghis Khan seed tree, or you're basically from this if you're European for the most part. And it really emphasized her height by being with Stallone and all that too. So she was definitely different from the norm and stood out. So that was a look that really took a lot of people by surprise. I agree with you though. She's got a look, no doubt about it. So that's not a bad thing. And then here, she's not really obviously the main thing to it. Stone plays this cop who works the zombie squad and all that, and it's basically you got this bad gang.
yeah,
It was Brian Thompson's the bad guy in here, who we've talked about before. We liked, and it's really we don't care what's going on with the bad dudes and how they're doing, even though he's got a cool knife and all that. This is your standard 91 minute flick. You know what's going to happen, but you just want to see Stallone do it. And here's the thing about it. At the time this came out, a lot of people did not like it. They thought, oh, it's just another cheap one. Stallone's capable of doing more, but he just cashed it in for a paycheck. You know what? This is a monster hit. It was massive. So I just think, you can say what you want about it and everything there too. Watch it and let us know what you think about it. So upon rewatching, because it's been a while since I think you've watched all that too, did anything new pop into mind?
Well, I not really nothing new. It's just like I got more appreciation for Brian Thompson's acting.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Brian, his talking about pigs and just want to hate people. Like, oh my gosh! So Brian Thompson, like many people don't really know who Brian Thompson is. Brian Thompson is a character actor. He was in Fright Night 2, I think. Believe it
Yes.
was. Yeah, it was in there.
Eating the insects. Yep.
Yep. He was also in later. I think his last acting credits that I know of was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The Michelle Gellar, the pilot episode. He was one of the vampires in there. We were popping for that when we reviewed it on here back in the channel a long time ago.
Yep.
But yeah, like that guy is pretty much like I wanted him to be in more stuff. If anything, we reviewed what was it? Out for Justice? No, not Out for Justice. What was the one we just did with the other guy, the football player?
Brian Bosworth.
Brian Bosworth.
Stone Cold.
I used to get him and Brian Bosworth mixed up. Brian Thompson, and Brian Bosworth, because they kind of got that tall kind of build, kind of. And then so when I see Brian Thompson here, Brian Thompson is just I like watching him work. Because he plays the perfect bad guys in this. He always plays the heavy, and this he's got more of a little longer hair and stuff. He's going around killing the weak. And I love this because when this movie starts out, it starts off with you get the like the grocery scene here, but you also get the axes together.
Yes.
And that striking of the axes together, it's like, like it's just man, and it really intensifies this movie. You get other songs like "Angel in the City," it's the other one that's going on too. It's just the soundtrack, the way they shoot everything. The warehouse, the kind of like the lighting, everything here just makes this movie pop more. And as you said, Stallone is not a tall guy. So when Stallone goes against Brian Thompson later in the movie, it's just like it seems more believable that that Stallone's gonna get killed. But also Brian Thompson has a knife that he carries around with him. It's a big old knife, and the last time I saw a knife like this, I kept thinking, "Is like, come on, Bennett, let's go." And thinking I'm thinking of the Commando with the knife play.
Or even if you go back to one of our more favorite films of the 80s, when we talk about Rambo, the survival knife he has in there,
Yeah,
this thing's just as big. It's a bit flashier
it's
in a
got
way, but
spikes. Yeah.
yeah, Brian Thompson, if you haven't seen him and you go look at him, you go like, "Oh my god, this guy's a meanie." He's just got this intensity about him. He's a rich baritone with his voice. So when he talks, he commands a certain sort of like he's not just a crazy guy yelling and screaming where you're like in Death Wish 3 from the year earlier, 1985, that we reviewed most recently here on the Extreme Movie Show. You could talk about a quiet presence that someone like Charles Bronson has in Death Wish 3, but all the goons were goofballs, and even though they might have had decent physiques or whatever like that, you can't take him seriously. Brian Thompson, when he walks on there and he just stares at you, whether he's in a suit or not, he has a piercing gaze to him and all that, and his physical stature is such that
Oh, the
you're going,
face,
you know what,
the dimples.
he might be a B-level guy, but that look and that appearance and that ability he had has carried him for a very long time, a good 30 plus year career.
He has that face, just kind of like people for those who watch Grease. Yeah, the guy, the stucco, whatever guy was, the kid, he's been burned. He's always plays the bad guy who's in Grease too. He's also the villain in that one too, on the motorcycle.
Back in the day, they would call it a pox face, meaning that you got
Yeah.
chicken pox and you got scars
Yeah.
from it that would continue into adulthood or whatever. I
So-
don't know that it's that, but it's
No.
definitely, I don't know if
Brian-
it's chiseled, but it's very noticeable when you see it.
Yeah, and it makes it pop and makes it stick out, and that's why and as far as whatever you're putting in Grease says, there's always the villain. He was racing against them. He has the same kind of like face, like the Pac face. You look at Brian Thompson; it's not a Pac face, but he has something similar to the way his bone structure is. His cheekbones stick out and stuff.
He's not ugly, but he's not pretty.
No.
And I wouldn't say he's handsome.
No,
he's rugged. Maybe I don't know.
He's kind of like that in this movie. He's kind of like that creepy handsome, in a sense.
Yeah,
I could imagine him going and telling us to put the lotion on, or he gets the hose.
It's not him. No, he's not that bad.
I know, but he's got that look though. So in this, and then not only that, is like when he's going around just killing people in this, it just reinforces this guy is not, he's a lunatic, and he's dangerous, and it sets the tone as far as like Stallone, you're falling for this chick, bro. You're supposed to be Zombie Squad. You're the guy who just sits in his office. He's got the cool car, messes around with the gangbanger who's basically you got this Latino guy gangbanger who's trying every time Stallone pulls up in his car, tries to mess with him, and then in front of his buddies but as soon as Stallone turns back to him, he's like he kind of chickens out, wusses out. I love that. So when Stallone goes in, Stallone is the type of guy who goes in there, and you're like, what is he doing? He's reaching for a pizza box or a refrigerator. And then instead he's got his little Uzi there. He's got the TV on. And then he's sitting there. He's got a piece of pizza too. And he just sits there and just takes the scissors and he cuts the tip off and then starts eating it. It's like
that scene everybody talks about.
Oh my gosh!
I don't know why. Because it's a nothing thing. But there's something about it where you're like, what the fuck just happened there? And then you see it happen.
It's such a weird thing. I can't name another movie where I've seen like a person come in, take a scissors, cut a piece of pizza off, and then just randomly eat it for no reason. Like he just lets it sit. I was like, wait, did somebody else eat a piece of it too? So he's cutting that part off because it was already been eaten, chewed on. So he's cutting. I mean, what is the deal with that? It is such a weird scene. But he's sitting there, but he's got the TV on, and he's just sitting there watching the little tube TV there, and he's just sitting back and he's cleaning his gun, and it's just. This guy is part of the Zombie Squad. He's a one man wrecking machine.
A one man wrecking crew.
I like it. I mean, but let's talk about the very beginning. Him coming in here and and just before I even get to the grocery store, like that opening scene where you see the gun, you see the snake and the cobra on it, the white handle, the nice polish, ivory handle. And then he talks about, his voice, it's like there's 235 rapes, and it's just like, and he goes over the statistics, and I'm thinking back then that probably was accurate, but it's probably a lot higher now than it is.
Well, the thing with crime is you think about Dirty Harry from the early 70s, the Clint Eastwood films. Obviously, there's some similarity here. A cop that gets results, but the people in charge don't want that to happen because they're progressive or they got to follow the rules and all that stuff. And that was kind of the theme in the 80s. And we've mentioned this before here, where when you watch an 80s film, cops usually made to be eating something, donuts, looking stupid or whatever. One of the last films where cops, for the most part, smart is either you got Beverly Hills Cop, where he just outsmarts people in a friendly way, Eddie Murphy, or we talk about Wolfen with Albert Finney, where he's just a smart guy, knows his business, but he's quiet about it in New York, which is a great underrated movie. But most of them are just buffoons and stupid asses. I mean, honestly.
The direct quote is in America, there's a burglary every 11 seconds, an armed robbery every 65 seconds, a violent crime every 25 seconds, a murder every 24 minutes, and 250 rapes a day. And I was just like, they're really trying to set the scene. Like this is a really bad, crime area, and they call him in when they can't handle it because the cops are incompetent, and they come in. And he's like, he's like the guy that he's the Rambo cop. He's the one. He's like the dirty hair, the one they don't want to have because someone's gonna end up dying. It'd be destruction. And he's like, well, you want the guy dead, or do you want to sit here and wait for you guys? Because he goes. I love it because he goes. Basically, this guy and his dirt bike shows up, starts shooting up the grocery store. Another wasn't that the other canon classic movie where they didn't like Stone Cold, right? Was that canon classic too?
No,
but I mean, like, this is where I think when you think about grocery store scenes or mini markets where people come in and they start shooting up things.
That was the opening scene in Stone Cold with Brian Bosworth.
Yeah.
He's got the duster on and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's the same thing too. With this guy's got he comes in and he just starts shooting up machines. You see the little cans of new Coke. I'm like, oh, you guys had really baby. We consider that baby Coke now for the grocery stores. You get the little mini cans.
Coke dominated the market in the 80s. They tried something really stupid, and that was one of the big things. They changed the original formula, then it failed so bad that they had to go back. And even though Cokes, for the most part, it's been a while since I've owned the stock, but going back and looking at it, I believe they still dominate the market in terms of percentages. But now bigger companies own them, and there's been a lot of shifting around in the industry and all that. That's been dominated by the sweet companies only by a few and all that. And that's why Gatorade isn't on the shelf anymore. But it's just it was so big that they would make jokes of it in movies like this because, again, to your point, supermarket scenes, that was product placement, right? It wasn't eating a bag of chips and showing it. It was just, hey. You happen to, go in there and you see Coke. You happen to see Pepsi or Mountain Dew or whatever. So definitely that was prevalent in here. Smart way to do it.
Yeah. So this guy takes over the grocery store. He's got cops out there, and so basically end up having he shows up, and then the guy's like, "Well, no, you can't go in there. We gotta wait for SWAT." He's like, "No." He just walks in there. And I just love the Stone Cold tried to copy this, but this is the original scene. This is the original movie to do this. Walking in there, goes in there, because you'll notice that there's another thing like from Dusk Till Dawn did a gas station scene.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of similar to this with the girls being hostages and stuff. This was actually one of my favorite scenes popping up is when he goes in there. And he just starts messing with the guy, and then before he basically blows him away, and then he just opens up a can of Coke.
Yeah,
like I just love this, and he walks out, and he's like, oh, he's like the guy's like, it's always like the classic, the sitcom or the cop or the like. You remember the movie show, the TV show called Sledgehammer?
Yes, absolutely.
The boss always yells at the guy because he has the big gun.
Yep.
This is kind of the similar thing towards the end of it. He's like, after he deals with the bad guy, saves the girl and everything, here comes his boss. And he's like, "What do you think you're doing? Blah blah. You're a reckless cannon. He's like, it's like you can't do this." And he just kind of just whatever, shrugs it off and leaves. So I mean, like I said, I kind of love this. Like Stallone, I probably think this is one of Stallone's badass characters. Everybody loves Rambo. But I always wanted more Cobra. Cobra had the cool car. He had the cool gun. He always, he was like with the sunglasses. This is like the tough as nails cop thing. And for a while, it looked like we were going to go a couple years ago get another Cobra TV series.
Yes,
with Stallone having his hand in it. But it seems like right now he's just dealing with working on Sumerian 2 and or the Samaritan 2 and some other movies. But I would love to see the continue. But getting back to the movie though, the movie, like I said, this is such a weird movie because like this is I'm not sure if this is when this is after this is after he basically got with Brigitte Nielsen
Yes.
and they married.
Yes.
After and I can't remember if he the big rumor was like he cheated on his first wife, Sasha Zach, whatever it was, and then got with Brigitte Nielsen during the filming of either Rocky 4 or was this movie. But
well, I mean, it is what it is, you know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
So there's there's kind of a dilemma on that stuff, and I was just that. So, yeah. So it was interesting to see the Stallone in a movie with his wife. You know, and because his first wife was an actress as well too.
Well, the thing with Stallone is because of how, you know, Rocky's one of the greatest American films of all time, in my opinion, and he definitely is very principled about it. If you go watch old interviews with him talking about why he wanted to stay in and everything too, I really appreciate it. And so, because he had such a good hit with that, and then Rocky 2, a lot of people liked as well. He had a lot of good grace with critics that were in the 70s very particular about it, very snooty about films. And so a lot of critics at the time had issues with movies that were like say Death Wish with Charles Bronson. We just reviewed the third one, also a canon film from the 80s, where Death Wish is 72. It's basically a liberal from the 70s. A bad thing happens, and he finds out the power of a gun, what it's like to control it, I guess. And people thought that was exploitive and all that. So the 70s were pretty wild in films. And we talk about how in the 80s things kind of leveled off. We had a lot of glitzy, glamour, fun, cutesy stuff for the most part. But then you would have movies like this that were regulated for the afternoons or evenings or for the action crowd. And one thing about Stallone, you know, is they gave him a bit of shit because they kept thinking like Orson Welles in a way, where Orson Welles, you come out with some great movies, you know, early on in your career, and people are like, man, it's one of the best movies of all time, you know, Rosebud, all that.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you follow that up? You know, and so some people took whatever might have been going on with Stallone personally as a way to kind of beat up on him or bitch about the kind of movies he wanted to make. And bottom line is Stallone was pretty secure in doing what he wanted to do. And nobody bitched or complained when Schwarzenegger decided to go from like Conan to like Twins and try to do comedy films and then get out of action and all that. And, I mean, everybody was different, and they had a big battle going on. And then, of course, we had our martial art movies in the 70s or the 80s as well that were interesting, but they were just different. So this movie I wanted to talk about being a canon classic. I don't think it's really related to anything, but it's one of the first movies at the time where if you're not used to watching movies that have Satanism in it or end of the world apocalypse kind of stuff.
New World Order, as they call themselves.
Yeah, they call themselves like the New World, and what it is they believe some people are inferior or whatever. And you're like, yeah, blah blah blah. We don't give a shit. You're probably high, and who cares? You're gonna die. Cobra's gonna kill you. But there was definitely a theme in the background of people that when we got to the year 99, 2000, some people thought that was the end of days. And so in the 70s, you had like this satanic thing that kind of came up more mainstream in occult, and you started seeing it and everything too. Some people said that's society breaking down or whatever. But in the 80s, you know, like John Carpenter a year or two from now would make Prince of Darkness about the end of the world and apocalypse. You always had people talking about that stuff, and you still had a lot of religious TV shows and people preaching late night on TV shows, you know, from mega churches, especially here in the South, that they would always talk about it. So much so that when we would eventually start talking about the X-Files that Brian Thompson starred in a lot of in the 90s, as well as Star Trek and other things, you started getting some of these gigantic conspiracy theories where they started becoming mainstream. Because at the time, there was only like the Omen and Catholic stuff and exorcisms. And then, of course, it would conclude with Millennium in the late 90s, which is a spinoff of the X-Files, a much darker one. So it's interesting to me that how do you make this group in LA be different? Well, you give them some sort of conspiracy angle to it. I don't know how it occurred, but it's definitely there.
No, but so, yeah, this is kind of like a cliche story. Like, basically, the guy, he's the cop that nobody likes. But the audience likes him because he's a bad boy. He's the guy, gets shit done. He's not gonna, he's not afraid to, to basically look the other way. The guy says like, we're the future. They're breeding us. He's like, no, you're history. Shoots him with the gun at the end. But like, I love this because this is also before smartphones. This is 1986. So when the Stallone is, in the back of the truck with the Uzi and just shooting him as the bikers are chasing him into this small town Like this, it's like this is more believable that you could still have more of a Wild West back then because response time for cops, and a lot of these small towns only had 1 or 2 cops, if one, because they were in big cities. That's where today, like the town I live in now, has about 6 or 7 cops now, or probably more than that. But back in the day, my mom was telling me, my dad, when they're growing up here, there was like 1 cop, and that's everybody knew it was that. It was like the Andy Griffith Show. So like, and I can see, like, you start getting onto some of these towns in the 80s, a bit of smaller suburbs. They probably didn't have that many cops. The cops were more in the bigger city area with more crime.
Right.
So when he basically goes, he's going to take her to a safe house. Well, the problem is that the Brian Thompson's his girlfriend is a cop, and she's obsessed with him too and stuff. She helps him with the killings, and
he bones her. I mean, that's all purpose.
He bones her, but she gets sweet karma from Reni. Cabretti, and then he just blows her away. But he's also got the grenades he lobs too. Remember at the back of the truck too?
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
It's he got grenades. He got this sweet looking like a little submachine gun, and the laser. I love it when they have the lasers on them.
The poster. Look, you see that poster? It makes you want to see the film.
Yeah, it does. And that looks like a Canon classic poster too.
That's what you're going to go see. That's what you're seeing when you see the movie.
He's got
Who cares about the plot? Look, we're not knocking Brian Thompson.
No.
A physical actor, good-looking guy. A very good heavy in his own way. And you know what? You were there to see Cobra. We're there to see, okay, what can Stallone do with this character? What's going to happen in it? We're going to have our montages. We're going to have our 80-ish sounding kind of thing, not necessarily synthesizers and all that synthwave stuff, but just the montage and the guitars and all that, and just everything's going to sound and look the same in the mid to late 80s. Not that that's bad, but this is just one of like hundreds of these kinds of films that were out there at the time.
Yeah, and then we haven't even talked about the 1950 Mercury that he's driving, the real star of this movie.
Do young people today, say the young 20-something Professor Pixel who joins us here on shows on the Extreme Movie Show, he's reviewing Forever Night with me, the 1990s sympathetic vampire figure. I asked him once about a car, and he's like, I didn't really notice. And it was like, but that's a Cadillac. That's a Caddy. That's a sweet ride.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and he said, yeah, young people don't care about cars these days. And I'm like, you know what? He's driving, what is it, 1950, 55 Mercury or something. And here, the car stands out so much so that people are standing around are looking at it. And he's basically looking at him like, you can look at it, but don't touch it because I'll kill you.
It's 1950s Mercury, and the way he soups it up, the way he works on it, it reminds me of the Thomas Jane Punisher movie where he basically, he souped up this muscle car. Maybe it was a nod to this. I don't know. But he soups it up, and then because a little kid gets in the way, he swerves it, and he ends up crashing it, flipping it, and then that whole badass car is just totaled, and you're like, that's it, that's all he used it for. And this was kind of the same, where he's driving with her in the car, and these guys are basically trying to attack him and stuff, and the car is just getting damaged. I'm thinking oh man, what a waste of a nice car. And it's just sad to see, and it's an older car. There ain't that many of those left.
Probably gets 10 miles to the gallon.
But it was still Stallone's
tank.
So the great thing about it was actually because Stallone is also had some writing credits in this too, and wanted to. And I'm sure he probably had some. They don't list him as being a director, but Stallone that used his own car. That was his car in this.
Just like Butt Kissing Rocky was his own dog. Yeah. So Stallone's very good at bringing an element of character to something. Plot is overrated, I think, sometimes. I think people want to watch for characters and that human thing to it. So when you see the opening scene is great. Let's be honest, okay? Yeah, Commando has a very effective opening scene when we review that. But this is just great, where he comes in, you're like, okay, he's playing the tough cop who gets things done differently. He might do like Dirty Harry, but Dirty Harry is tall, and he might just kind of stare at you, and then it'll blow you away. Here, Cobra just kind of like makes these I don't give a shit kind of comments that are kind of funny, and then he kills the guy. No reaction on his face. That's perfect.
Yeah,
That's
the whole going through IMDb here. There's a whole section of quotes of. So the killer says like, "I got a bomb here. I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna blow this whole place up." And like he's like, "Go ahead. I don't shop here."
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, people ate that shit up.
Yeah. All right. Just relax, amigo. You want to talk? We'll talk. I'm a sucker for good conversation. I don't want to talk to you now. Now bring in the television cameras here now. He's like, bring him. He's like, can't do that. Like, why? I don't deal with cycles. I put them away. Like I ain't no cycle, man. I'm a hero. Now you're looking at a effing hunter, a hero of the new world. And he's like, you're a disease. I'm the cure.
People ate that shit up. That is a great line, and people could say that's stupid. It's in a dumb 80s movie that nobody gives a shit about.
And that's where he throws the knife, though. The guy points the shotgun at him, and he throws the knife, hits him in the gut. And then Nick Kirby fires 5 rounds from his 45 into the can, and just like, and then he walks out. Like there's such an intense scene. It's like, and we forget that sometimes this is a day-to-day actual like real life thing without the talking though. Like cops have to go in these situations. So, but it's just like they are like Hollywood, basically Hollywoodize it. I guess Hollywoodize it. Is that the correct term? Make it seem more fun than it is. But
yeah, make it sexy, glamorize it.
But yeah, he says like your disease, I'm the cure, and then later on the guy's like, I'm the future. He's like, no, your history. Like the one-liners on this is Stallone, along with if you're a Stallone fan and you love the 80s movies, check this out. Brian Thompson is just playing the perfect bad guy. Brigitte Nielsen actually playing a woman in this for once, not a really butch woman.
Well, she shows a lot more range. She's supposed to play the tough, cold, ruthless Russian wife, right? I mean, she's supposed to do that.
In Rocky 4, yes.
Yeah.
And then she kind of plays the same kind of woman, in Beverly Hills Cop 2, I believe it is. No, is it 2 or 3? Whatever the one, the gun range. I think it was 3. Might have been 3. It's hard. They all run together for me. But no, like I said, in this though, she's got the longer hair. She's the model, and then she witnesses the murder, and like Brian Thompson's characters, them are trying to like find her, locate her, and like, kill her and stuff. And she's like, she refuses. No, I'm not gonna be sitting there and be afraid. I'm gonna go to work and she's got the weird 80s stuff with the robots, and she's posing and she's showing some skin, and she actually looks pretty good in this. Like I said, she actually looks like a babe. I could see why Stallone liked her with the longer hair. But so as soon as she kept that Grace Jones haircut.
Oh, the short hair is great stuff. Oh, not all women can pull off, but she can.
No. Like I said, yeah, Stallone, he wanted to play cliffhanger on a permanent basis with her. Sorry. No, like I said, this is a fun movie.
It is, and one thing too, we don't mention this too much about bad guys, but like when we reviewed Charles Bronson Death Wish 3, it's definitely several levels below the first movie or even second one.
Sure.
It's entertaining. If you know the character, that's great. You don't have to watch the first 2 movies to do it. It has enough elements of it. Plus, it's still directed by the same guy that did the first 2, and that helps, right? And Charles Bronson always makes a movie watchable. Same thing with Stallone. I'll watch anything with Stallone in it, whether it's good or it's bad, because he's gonna bring something to it. Some of the movies may not be great, but he'd be the first one to tell you, this one wasn't so great, but we tried to do this, and this is what we came up with. So he's pretty humble and honest about those things. But at the same time, you take somebody like Brian Thompson, you're like, oh, this is kind of stupid, this is dumb, this goofy. But you know what? In Death Wish, these guys they were like marked on their face with paint a little bit, like dashes and stuff.
Yeah.
They were not intimidating guys. Now, you wouldn't, of course, want to be harassed by a group of them and all that too, but you didn't take them seriously. Brian Thompson, you look at like, this guy's tough looking. But here's the thing. You almost want to laugh at it, because thugs in the 80s, you would see this a lot in movies. What they would do to disguise their face, because there's not that many cameras, is they would just take like women's pantyhose, put it over their head, and just wear it to do things. So when Brian Thompson does, you're like, oh my God, he's putting pantyhose over his face. You're like, no, he looks fucking creepier. I mean, he's just that good.
No, I don't even understand him in the janitor outfit, and then he's standing behind the wait lady in the elevator, and he's got the knife.
Yeah,
and he's just gonna stab her in the back. You know, it's like, oh, this is gonna happen. If it doesn't happen, like you're kind of disappointed, but when it does happen, it's like you're kind of like, oh, it's just like Michael Myers, man. The minute he stabs on you, you kind of cheer, but you're not supposed to cheer
Right.
because he's just that great of a villain.
Yeah.
And so this is actually also let people know this is George P. Cosmatos or Cosmatos, who just worked with Stallone on part 2 of First Blood, the previous year before this, and then he'd go on to work on the Leviathan in 1989. And then after that, shortly, he basically direct another movie with Clint Eastwood and everybody's favorite character actor, Morgan Freeman. They did Tombstone.
No.
Not Tombstone. It was. Sorry, I mean, I hate this. I always get confused. Unforgiven and Tombstone. Unforgiven is Morgan Freeman.
Tombstone is Tombstone or Unforgiven. It's one of those.
It's Tombstone. I think it is. Yeah, I think it's Tombstone. He did because Tombstone was. I'm looking right now because the guy didn't have like bigger movies at all. But he'd Tombstone in 1993. That's Kurt Russell with your boy Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer.
Yes. Dude, like I said, this was a fun movie. And like I said, when you first watch movies, a lot of us don't look to see who the director is unless you especially if you're going back and watch a movie before you were. I'm a millennial, born '85. So when I was 1 year old when this came out. So when I went to watch this originally in the '90s, I saw it on TV, and they cut out the things and stuff, which I loved about '90s TV television. When the Sunday afternoon movies, whatever, Super 18 or on Fox, they dub it the bad, like the mother trucker. And
you got such
so a lot of us, will not go back and look and see who directed this. What else did they go direct? So I love this when we review these things. I get to go and I go and look and see, this guy directed this. What else did they work on? And at first I didn't recognize George's name, and then I start seeing some of his other films. I'm like, okay, now it makes sense because a lot of these are kind of similar too, and the way they're shot, the way they're directed, and they're all bangers.
Yeah, the one thing about Cosmatos Senior that I want to point out too is that's interesting because it's kind of ties to some more recent stuff. Is that my understanding is Kurt Russell kind of did a lot of work on the Tombstone film or whatever it was, the one that he directed. But the other thing about it too that's pretty interesting is that he has a son who took the residuals that he inherited from the DVDs that this would turn into and the VHSs, right? Because it's such a popular movie, everybody loves it. It's a great film. Even though Kurt Russell, like I said, had a big hand in it. He took that to finance a few movies, and I one of the things reviewed early on here was one that nobody watched called Beyond the Black Rainbow, super trippy, and then very psychological and stuff. But he also did Mandy with Nick Cage that I think you and I reviewed also at the time, and he definitely has a very interesting look to it. And he hasn't done a lot of films. He did an episode of some horror films or show that we had talked about a while back, and he has a very outer spacey kind of look to it, and I just absolutely love the aesthetic. And I thought, okay, Cosmatos, where have I heard that name? And you understand that when he grew up, he saw a lot of the weird stuff in the 70s and 80s, and so he brings that aesthetic to it that a lot of people don't. So even though like It Follows is a tremendous horror film that's almost perfect, it has a very great 80ish kind of like feel and vibe to it, synthwave, and it's hard to capture it because a lot of people today just throw stuff together in an 80s style because they think it's cool or they like it, but they don't know what makes it work. And like we've said before here on the Extreme Movie Show, not just with movies, but with television, a lot of people try to recreate that vibe, and the younger people today seem to like it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Cobra Kai kind of works because they are the original people involved, but sometimes they don't. So it's amazing. You take a film like Cobra, nobody would probably has heard about it, care about, or if you're a Ryder Sheridan fan and you've watched all his TV shows and you go, oh, the Tulsa King guy? Yeah, this is the same guy. He's the same guy that did Rocky Balboa and everything else here too. I mean, the guy's an icon, living legend. Hopefully he still has some more working before he passes away. But Cobra, I agree with you for my final thoughts. Fun film. If you're any sort of 80s fan, action fan, Stallone fan, you owe it to yourself to see it. It's a little bit different and it works.
The other, we're talking about character actors. Dan from this film, you remember his character, David Rasche. David Rasche popped up in a few different movies over the years, TV shows.
Well, he was Sledgehammer.
Yes, he's as I brought up Sledgehammer before.
Yeah.
He's in this, and so I was like, I watched the pilot episode of that last night. And I was just like, what is this like Police Squad? It just felt that way. The way it was, everything was so over the top. Like obviously it's a joke or sarcastic. But yeah, this guy's been in a lot of stuff. But where I saw him recently was in Miami Vice.
Yeah.
He was Surf. He was the guy who was trying to protect them. He was working for the trying to bring back the Russian girl. Back because they had information, bring him back to Russia, and he's like, and then he gets taken out by John Johnson. But he had another character actor here, because I always get confused because he kind of looks like the other guy from Die Hard, the one who's like always a news reporter trying to get the scoop.
Yes, yeah.
The asshole. It's kind of the same kind of like look, to him, So yeah, so he's in this movie. He's got a small part in this, but
I did want to ask you one thing.
Sure.
So we talked about he had that little hand Uzi in here, and of course he's got here with the laser scope on it and all that too. I want to talk about that. That's a 1911 pistol, isn't it? Where he's got the Cobra emblem on the handle.
Colt?
I think it's the pearl handle.
It looked like a Colt, yeah, 1911.
So in Death Wish, we talked about his handgun, whatever name he called it.
The Wildy. Yeah, Wildy. Yeah. It was a gas powered, basically big game version of the Magnum. It's a 475.
Yeah,
it's Dirty Harry had the 457.
That's the kind of gun that you would have seriously if you were going to have a handgun. If you're hunting, that might have a chance of scaring a bear off if you shot it, because unless you had a shotgun or something like that, a lot of hunting guns aren't.
No, you always carried the 45 with you, and then and then there's different versions. They originally had a black powder, powder keg, before they had that. You use that too. But if you're gonna like. I remember it was such a taboo thing for Hollywood. Is like they're like, we got Dirty Harry with the big gun, and then we got Charles Bronson with the big gun. So it's like, all right, we saw Charles Bronson with Wildy. What could top this? The Uzi in the pizza box. and then he's got the Cobra style kind of like gun, a Colt. It was like they're over the top here, but but. That's it though. You don't see him go grab another giant machine gun or stuff.
Right.
But let's talk about the fight at the end though. In the little like slaughterhouse or something like that. The hook. It almost hooks you, doesn't it? It keeps calling him Peg and all, he's like, it's like the law stop back there,
we saw him. Look, Stone's got no problem with violence, especially if it helps with the story. And when we talked about Rambo a couple years ago, where the young Mexican girl kind of gets taken by the cartel, he goes across the border to rescue her, right? I mean, how prescient was that at the time, right? But at the end where he goes and he guts the guy in the barn, just rips him wide open. I'm thankful for the fact that Stallone has a certain appreciation of violence, because you had the cartoonish violence in the 80s that you would see in a lot of stuff. And it didn't scare you, intimidate you, it didn't make you puke or vomit or whatever. There was definitely, though, a certain amount of violence in early 80s films, like The Executioner and other things, too, where you're like, fuck, this is graphic, it's disgusting, and it's exploitive and all that. But it was such a grimy-looking thing, especially if it was filmed in New York City, where you're like, it's kind of believable.
Yeah.
They don't quite go here with that Cobra, but Stallone will always do something like that at the end to make you remember you got a great opening. You got your whatever stuff going on in the middle here. You got this scene, you got that scene, blah, blah, blah. But then what do you do? Chapter 3, the end result, the resolution. You got to finish off with the final fight. Bang. Roll credits. That's it. I mean, Stallone's smart enough to go, I'm gonna give you two really great things in here in this film.
And I pop more for like the end because I love the setting, the scenery where they are. A small little town, little shops, it just, it's the 80s, man. Look at the small little. It kind of looks like you went to a boom town where they had like the Wild West, a different general shop here, and then it's like all these years later, and they kind of modernize it more. It hasn't really got that full 90s or 2000s. Now we have the suburban populated area. with we got there's like all different modernized stuff. It
Mhm.
still looked like if you were watching Knight Rider when he pulls into a town, like they would or not even Knight Rider. It was also the A-Team. They pull in these small backwards towns, back hole towns, and they have these like kind of cowboy western looks to them because that's how old they are.
It
And
is
so
like a Western in a way, right?
yeah,
You're drawing a line in the sand, the bad people are coming to you, and
yeah.
all you can do
So
is defend yourself.
it was a perfect setting for this, and these people I guess are having like cottages up there, a place to stay up there. So it was great. And like I said, like this movie ends with a bang, begins with a bang. It's Stallone, it's Cobra, it's got the same title font as Rambo. What more do you need?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, John Carpenter was always fond of the Albertus font, and he did a movie called Assault on Precinct 13, which caught a lot of people's attention, and he directed Kurt Russell in a TV movie of Elvis, and then Halloween, of course, blew up. But he would almost take like the Western theme of people
Yeah.
being forced together to do things, whereas you kind of do get that here at the end, because instead of having the big shootout like in the city complex or like Miami Vice, I know you're watching that show for the first time and you're a couple seasons in, one of my favorite shows of the 80s. You always have the big shootout or something at the end with music, 80s music playing, and it's usually somewhere in that was made to look sexy, because, well, damn it, if that's one thing that Miami Vice is known for, is really being atmospheric and drawing you in just with it. You don't maybe know what was going on or know the people's names or who the drug lord of the week was, unless it was a guest star, which they had plenty of. But you just knew there was going to be some sort of shootout, some sort of violence with music playing. So it was like a music video, but with violence. And in here, you kind of get a similar thing. You get something going on, you get your violence, and you're going to remember that. How it starts and how it ends is what a lot of people do it. But I'm telling you, people really shit on Stallone for this, for Over the Top, which we reviewed here too, the arm wrestling one. But you know what, damn it, there's been a couple arm wrestling movies out there, and I'm glad Stallone did it, because he's the kind of guy that would do it. I can't see Arnold doing it. And that's not a complaint. These two guys had their own sets of movies. I still would rather, honestly, and I'm going to go on the record saying this, I would rather watch Stallone's films from the 80s than Schwarzenegger's. I'm being serious.
Did you recognize Detective Monte in here, Andrew Robinson? I just realized this. He's the killer from Dirty Harry.
Yep.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yep.
So they're tied to Dirty Harry.
It is. And again, when you work with people, we've talked about this, like with Jackie Chan and his group, or Michelle Yeoh and some of the ladies.
My gosh!
There's this crossover, right? They do all kind of appear. Together later.
Reni Santoni is Chico in Dirty Harry.
Yes,
he's the partner. I am now today's years old. Did not realize that those guys are both in Dirty Harry. We're in this movie.
All right. Any other final thoughts on Cobra?
No. If you have, I can't stress enough. If you've not watched this movie, stop what you're doing. Stop watching whatever weird shows out today. Go back and watch this movie. You can find it for but online, you can basically any Amazon Prime or Vudu, wherever you rent your movies, you can rent it for like $2, or you can own it for $7, a digital copy if you want to, or pay whatever. Or you can look on Walmart. Sometimes they have them for $5. I'm sure they have steel cases coming out soon. They had Rambo. I think they just had another Cobra 1 or something like that come out, and they're like, dude, do yourself a favor, watch this movie. And just it's a popcorn flick, man. It is just that good. Brian Thompson's kind of cheesy, kind of like the bad guy. It's it's like the creep with the knife, big knife, and he's got the axe, the 2-headed axe, and he just wants to start hacking people, brutally murder people, and it's just great. And Stallone, his one-liners, it's just fun. So I can't stress it enough. So if you haven't watched this movie, do yourself a favor, go watch it now. It is just awesome.
Yeah, you're not an 80s fan if you haven't watched Cobra. No. You can't say that. I mean,
like we talk about Cliffhanger and some of his other movies he's done, but like on Rambo's got a lot of bullets. Yes, it's and it's usually got some kind of like serious tone at the end or monologue or lesson at the end. He says, it's like, what about us? It's like after he's blown away like 30 million people. It's just him basically just being a Dirty Harry, of his own. Dirty Harry and Cabretti teaming up together would be awesome.
And remember, if you want to learn how to eat pizza American style, You know, you'll know the scene. That's all I'm going to say.
You just grab the scissors and then you just whatever reason, I don't know why, but it's a signature thing.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching, listening. Thanks for sharing the links and spending time with us. We appreciate it. That's the best gift of all is just spending some time together. We don't try to get too hardcore in here as far as hate watch and get political only when it really talks about the movie. That's what we do. I'm the 80s guy. He's the 90s guy. And we got the aughts guy, too, that joins us. He does a lot of TV with me, Professor Pixel. So we're currently doing Forever Night, which it hasn't been too popular, but we enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's very campy. It's like Dark Shadows in a way, which we reviewed. Maybe a cross between that Twin Peaks. What's that?
From a few different people that have seen it that are older in my circle of friends, they say they've watched Forever Night. It was a good show when it came out. I don't know how it stands up today, but if you guys want to find out, check out these guys on Sundays. They review it. It's just fun.
The argument for it is that it's where, because of AIDS and all that from the 80s and 90s becoming mainstream in pop culture at the time, it's like, well, how do we have a vampire when you're dealing with blood, with AIDS being out there, and how do we do it right? And they made him kind of progressive, actually, where he doesn't want to kill and he wants to become human. And without it, you would not have Buffy. You would not have, was it Angel? I know we had talked about on the stream.
Angel was this big spinoff where he became a detective and was helping people solve cases.
Not for Forever Night, you don't have any of these.
No.
So it's kind of an interesting idea. Yeah. No. But he's a cop. I mean, cop shows dominated the 80s. I mean,
he's a cop, and crime sucks.
Good night now.
Later, guys. Thanks for watching.